What happens when an undercover CEO walks into his own business and discovers it's nothing like what he built? Ethan Carter thought he ran a company built on trust, until he went undercover and saw the truth for himself. Customers were being deceived, employees were pressured to push unfair deals, and greed had taken over. But instead of walking away, he took action. From exposing corrupt managers to rebuilding his company's values, this story is about leadership, accountability, and real change. Stay tuned, because this undercover CEO is about to turn his business upside down. Ethan Carter had built his luxury furniture business from the ground up. What started as a single boutique store had expanded into a thriving chain of 10 locations, catering to high-end customers looking for elegant home furnishings. His company had once been known for its quality, integrity, and exceptional customer service. But lately, things had started to change. Complaints were piling up, customers feeling pressured into high-interest financing, employees being accused of dishonest sales tactics, and stories of humiliating treatment toward lower-income shoppers. Ethan took these concerns seriously, but every time he brought them up with his executive team, he got the same response. It's just a few unhappy customers, nothing to worry about. But Ethan wasn't convinced. He refused to let his business become just another money-driven retail giant that cared more about profits than people. Instead of relying on reports and second-hand accounts, he decided to see the truth for himself. His plan? Go undercover as an average customer. With the help of a professional disguise artist, Ethan transformed into Sam Reeves, a middle-aged man with a slightly unkempt look, graying hair, thick glasses, and a hesitant demeanor. He traded in his tailored suits for a cheap polo shirt, faded jeans, and scuffed sneakers, making himself look like someone shopping on a tight budget. Ethan knew that his face was only familiar to upper management, meaning that the employees on the showroom floor had never seen him in person. That gave him the perfect cover. His plan was simple: walk into one of his underperforming stores, observe the sales tactics, and find out what was really happening when no one thought the CEO was watching. He wouldn't announce his presence, wouldn't ask leading questions. He'd just act like a regular customer, looking for affordable furniture. Stepping out of his car, Ethan took a deep breath before walking toward the massive glass doors of the store. The moment he stepped inside, he immediately noticed something was off. The energy was tense. Salespeople hovered like vultures, eyeing customers as if they were commission checks rather than people. Ethan could feel it in the air. This place wasn't the business he had built. He was about to find out just how bad things had gotten. And if what he had heard was true, then his employees had no idea that everything was about to change. As Ethan, now disguised as Sam Reeves, stepped deeper into the showroom, he immediately noticed the way the sales team operated. Instead of welcoming customers warmly, the employees scanned them like predators assessing their prey. Some hovered near the entrance, eyeing well-dressed shoppers, while others ignored customers who didn't seem profitable enough. It was clear that in this store, customers weren't people, they were targets. Ethan walked past glossy dining sets and plush sectionals, pretending to browse when he spotted a salesman in his early 30s, Jordan, standing with his arms crossed, smirking as he dismissed a young couple who had just asked about financing. "If you can't afford it, maybe this store isn't the right place for you," he scoffed, before turning away, leaving the couple looking embarrassed. Ethan clenched his jaw. Was this how his employees treated people who just wanted fair payment options? Then, across the showroom, Ethan noticed a single father named David, a man in his late 40s wearing worn-out work boots and a faded jacket, standing near a modest bedroom set. He ran his hand over the headboard, clearly considering it. Before he could even ask a question, Jordan swooped in. "Looking for something cheap?" Jordan sneered, his tone dripping with condescension. David hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I just need something basic for me and my daughter. Money's a little tight." Jordan let out a mocking laugh. "Oh man, you're in the wrong place. Our cheapest set is probably way out of your budget." He gestured toward a clearance section in the back. "Maybe try something used?" David's face reddened with embarrassment, and Ethan could see his hands tighten into fists. He looked as though he wanted to say something but held back. Jordan, however, wasn't done. "Or, he added with a smirk, "maybe you should check the thrift store downtown. Might be more in your range." A few salespeople in the background snickered. Ethan felt his blood boil. The blatant humiliation, the arrogance, the utter lack of human decency. This was not the company he had built. He wanted to step in right then and there, but he forced himself to stay in character. He needed to see more, to fully understand just how deep this toxic culture ran before making his move. As David turned away, shoulders slumped, Ethan took a deep breath. This was just the beginning, and he already knew things were worse than he had imagined. Ethan watched as David shuffled away, his face still flush from the humiliation, his stomach twisted. How many other customers had walked in, hoping for fair treatment, only to be dismissed like this? He needed to see how deep the problem went. He wandered further into the store, eyeing the finance desk, where customers finalized their purchases. A young couple sat across from Chris, the financing specialist, their expressions shifting from excitement to unease as he rapidly flipped through paperwork. Ethan sidled closer, pretending to examine a nearby recliner, just in time to hear Chris's smooth, rehearsed pitch. "This financing plan is perfect for you," Chris assured them, tapping a glossy brochure. "Low monthly payments, no problem." The woman hesitated. "Wait, so it's $120 a month?" Chris nodded quickly. "Yep, just sign here and you'll be all set." But Ethan caught something Chris had conveniently left out. There, in tiny print on the contract, was the real cost, a staggering 29% interest rate that would balloon the total payment by thousands over time. The couple glanced at each other's uncertainty. Ethan clenched his jaw. This wasn't just one bad salesman. This was a system designed to trap customers. As he turned away, he spotted Mia, the younger sales associate he had noticed earlier, subtly shaking her head as if warning the couple. She quickly looked around, then whispered, "Make sure you read all the terms first." Ethan approached her as she walked back toward the showroom. Lowering his voice, he asked, "What did you mean by that?" Mia hesitated, her eyes darting toward the finance desk. "Look, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but the financing here is kind of a scam," she admitted quietly. "Most people don't qualify for the advertised low rates, but they don't find out until they're already locked in." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And the sales team knows this?" Mia sighed. "Of course, it's part of the process. Get the customer excited, make them commit, and by the time they realize how much they're actually paying, it's too late." Ethan's chest tightened. His company wasn't just treating customers poorly, it was actively deceiving them. Before he could ask more, a loud argument erupted at the finance desk. A woman's voice, sharp with frustration, cut through the air. Ethan turned to see another angry customer demanding answers about a contract she didn't fully understand. His jaw tightened. He had seen enough. The deeper he dug, the worse things got. This was beyond bad employees. This was systemic greed. Ethan had already seen enough to confirm his suspicions. His business had strayed far from the values he built it on. But just as he was about to step away from the finance desk, a loud argument erupted near the showroom floor, drawing his attention. A woman in her early 40s, wearing a professional blazer, stood gripping a stack of paperwork, her voice sharp with anger. "This is not what I agreed to," she snapped at Jordan, who stood before her, arms crossed, wearing his usual smirk. "Ma'am," Jordan drawled, rolling his eyes, "everything's in the contract. You signed it." "You rushed me through it. You said my payment would be $200 less than this," the woman argued, shaking the papers at him. "You lied." Jordan shrugged dismissively. "Maybe you should have read the fine print." Ethan could feel the blood pounding in his ears. He knew exactly what was happening. The woman had likely been given the same shady financing trick he had just witnessed. A low monthly payment dangled in front of her, only for her to be slammed with hidden fees and sky-high interest rates once the contract was locked in. The woman's hands trembled as she pointed at the paperwork. "I trusted you. I need this furniture for my new apartment. I can't afford this." Jordan sighed dramatically. "Well, if you can't make the payments, maybe you should reconsider your lifestyle choices." Ethan's fists clenched at his sides. That was it. Enough was enough. He turned his gaze toward David, who was still lingering at the back of the store, debating whether to try again or leave empty-handed. 2 customers, one dismissed for not being rich enough, the other manipulated into a financial trap. His company was failing people. He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to remain in character just a little longer. He needed to see how Logan, the store manager, would react to this. Would he intervene? Would he put a stop to Jordan's blatant mistreatment of customers? But Logan was nowhere in sight. Instead, other salespeople chuckled under their breath, completely unfazed by what was happening. That was all the confirmation Ethan needed. This wasn't just a few bad apples, it was the entire store's culture. Straightening his shoulders, Ethan took a slow step forward. The act was over. It was time to reveal who he really was, and once he did, everything was about to change. Ethan stepped forward, his pulse steady but his anger barely restrained. The humiliation of a struggling father, the deception of innocent customers, the blatant greed, he had seen enough. It was time to end this charade. Jordan, still smirking, turned toward him. "Sir, if you're looking for a deal, I can—" "I'm not looking for a deal, Jordan," Ethan said, his voice calm but cutting through the air like a blade. "I own this store." The entire showroom fell silent. Jordan's smirk vanished instantly, his face drained of color as his mouth hung open, struggling for a response. From the finance desk, Chris froze mid-sentence while the angry customer he had been misleading turned to gape at Ethan in shock. A few feet away, Mia's eyes widened, and she quickly covered her mouth. Other employees exchanged nervous glances, shifting uncomfortably. Ethan slowly pulled off his thick glasses, wiped a hand down his face, and stood tall in his real identity. Gone was Sam Reeves, the timid budget shopper. In his place stood Ethan Carter, the man who had built this business from nothing. Logan, the store manager, suddenly appeared from his office, his face pale as he realized what was happening. "Mr. Carter," he stammered, straightening his tie. I didn't realize you were—" "Of course you didn't," Ethan cut in smoothly. His eyes locked onto Jordan. "But you certainly had no problem mocking a father trying to buy a bed for his child." He gestured toward David, who stood watching, stunned. "You had no problem manipulating this woman into signing a financing deal she didn't fully understand." He turned toward Chris, who shrunk in his seat. "And you had no problem sitting here locking people into financial traps without a second thought." Jordan swallowed hard. "You're fired." Jordan's face turned bright red. "You can't." "I can, and I just did." Jordan looked around as if expecting someone to defend him, but no one spoke. He stormed out, slamming the showroom door behind him. Ethan then turned to Logan, who was shifting nervously. "And you," he said, his voice controlled but firm, "you let this happen. You let this culture thrive." Logan raised his hands. "Look, Mr. Carter, I was just following the company's—" "No," Ethan said sharply, "you weren't following my company's values. You were following a culture of greed and dishonesty." He exhaled. "You're done here." Logan's jaw dropped, but he knew there was no saving himself. Without another word, he turned and headed toward his office, likely to collect his belongings before disappearing for good. Ethan scanned the room. Every remaining employee was watching, some fearful, some relieved. He had their attention now. "Things are changing," Ethan announced, his voice echoing through the store. "Starting today." The tension in the showroom was thick, a mixture of shock, fear, and silent anticipation. Employees stood frozen, unsure of what would happen next. Customers, some pretending to browse, others openly staring, knew they were witnessing something bigger than a simple confrontation. Ethan had just shattered the toxic culture that had ruled this store for far too long. But firing the worst offenders was just the beginning. Now he had to fix the system. Ethan turned to the woman who had been deceived by the financing team. She still clutched the paperwork, her hands shaking slightly. "Ma'am," Ethan said, his tone softening, "we're going to fix this. No hidden fees, no last-minute changes. You'll get the deal you were originally promised. Fair and honest." She looked at him skeptically, still processing the whirlwind of events. "You mean that?" "I do," Ethan nodded. "And not just for you, for every customer who walks through these doors." Mia, who had been standing silently, finally spoke up. "Sir, what happens now?" Her voice was cautious but steady. Ethan met her gaze. "We rebuild," he said simply. Then, glancing at the other employees, he continued, "If you're willing to do things the right way, to be honest with customers, to stop treating them like walking commission checks, you have my full support. But if you think what happened today was unfair, if you believe the way we were running things before was acceptable, there's the door. Silence. Then Mia took a step forward. I want to stay. Ethan gave her a small nod. He had seen integrity in her from the start, and that's exactly what the company needed. He turned toward Chris, the finance specialist, who had spent the past 10 minutes looking like he wanted to disappear. Chris, I saw what you did today, Ethan said. You went along with the deception, but I also saw you hesitate. That tells me you're not beyond fixing. Chris swallowed hard. I was just doing what I was told. Ethan's voice remained firm. You have two choices. Start doing things the right way or leave now. What's it going to be? Chris hesitated, then straightened. I'll do it right. Ethan nodded, one step closer to turning this place around. Then he turned to Mia. You warned customers even when it wasn't in your best interest. That's the kind of leadership this place needs. He paused, then made his decision. Starting today, you're the new store manager. Mia's eyes widened. Me? You, Ethan confirmed. This place needs someone who actually cares about customers. Someone like you. The room shifted. The employees who had been unsure before now stood a little straighter. The customers who had witnessed the chaos now watched with curiosity instead of doubt. This was the beginning of something new, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan knew his business was finally headed in the right direction. The next morning, the air in the store felt different. The usual tension was gone, replaced by something else. Uncertainty, maybe even hope. The employees who had stayed seemed to realize that things weren't going back to the way they were. Ethan had made it clear. His store would no longer operate on deception and greed. But now comes the real test. Would customers believe the change was real? As if on cue, David walked in. Ethan watched as the struggling single father hesitated at the entrance, his hand gripping the door handle for a second too long. He looked as if he wasn't sure whether to step inside or turn back. Given how he'd been treated before, Ethan wouldn't have blamed him for leaving. But then Mia, now officially the new store manager, stepped forward. David, welcome back, she said warmly. Her tone was genuine, no sales gimmicks, no forced enthusiasm, just a person talking to another person. David gave a war nod. Guess I just wanted to see if you were serious about what you said yesterday. We are, Ethan said, stepping forward. And I'd like to prove it to you. This time no one rushed him, no one sneered at him. Instead, Mia led him to a section with sturdy, well-priced bedroom sets. She explained everything clearly, breaking down the honest financing options, no tricks, no hidden fees. David ran a hand over the headboard of a simple but well-made bed. And you're telling me this payment plan isn't going to double on me later? Chris, standing nearby at the finance desk, took a steady breath before responding. No, sir, what you see is what you get, no surprises. He glanced at Ethan, then back at David. I promise. Ethan watched closely. He could see it. The moment David realized things really were different. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. All right, David said after a pause. Let's do this. Chris carefully walked him through the paperwork, ensuring every number was clear and transparent. By the time David signed the final document, his face no longer held the hesitation he had walked in with. As Ethan shook his hand, David gave him a nod of quiet appreciation. Didn't think a furniture store could prove me wrong, he admitted, but I'll admit when I'm wrong. Ethan smiled. This was the first of many tests, but today they had passed. The change at the store had started, but Ethan knew one location wasn't enough. If this toxic culture had taken root here, how many of his other stores were suffering from the same problem? He needed to rebuild not just this store, but the entire business. A few days later, he called for an urgent company-wide meeting, gathering all the store managers and executives from his 10 locations. As they settled in, whispering amongst themselves, many were still in disbelief over what had happened. Some had heard about the firings, others were convinced this was a temporary shakeup, that things would go back to business as usual. Ethan made it clear they were wrong. We're not the company I built anymore, he said, scanning the room. We've become the kind of business that tricks customers instead of helping them. That stops today. A few managers shifted uncomfortably, but others nodded in agreement. Ethan continued, laying out new policies. No more deceptive financing. Every customer would receive clear terms with no hidden fees. No more aggressive sales tactics. Employees would be rewarded for customer satisfaction, not manipulation. Honesty and service first. They would earn customers' trust instead of exploiting them. Some managers hesitated. One of them, a senior executive named Mark, spoke up. "Ethan, I get what you're trying to do, but this business runs on commissions. If we stop pushing financing, profits will take a hit." Ethan didn't flinch. "We're not stopping financing," he clarified. "We're making it honest. Customers will know exactly what they're signing up for." He glanced around the room. "And if you think we can't succeed without tricking people, you don't belong here." Silence. Then Mia spoke up. "I was part of this culture too, but I always knew it was wrong. Customers shouldn't feel like they're being hunted when they walk into our stores." Other employees began nodding. Even Chris, once part of the problem, raised his voice in agreement. Ethan could feel the shift. Not everyone was convinced, but the momentum was changing. By the end of the meeting, some managers still looked doubtful, but no one walked out. Ethan had made it clear, this company was going to do business the right way, or they weren't going to do business at all. In the following weeks, word spread fast. Customers started coming back, drawn by the promise of fair deals and transparent pricing. Employees who had once feared speaking up now felt empowered to do the right thing. And most importantly, trust was being rebuilt. For the first time in years, Ethan felt proud of his company again. But he also knew this was just the beginning. Real change takes time, and he was in it for the long haul. A month had passed since Ethan had gone undercover, and the transformation was undeniable. The culture of his company had shifted. Customers, once wary, now returned with confidence. Employees who had been afraid to speak up now took pride in their honesty. Sales weren't just recovering, they were improving. Trust was proving to be more valuable than deception ever had been. One evening, as Ethan sat in his office reviewing reports, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Mike told some guys at work about what happened. One of them needs a new couch. He's stopping by tomorrow. Hope this wasn't just a one-time thing." It was from David. Ethan smiled, his chest tightening with a mix of relief and pride. He typed back, "It's not. See you soon." As he set the phone down, he leaned back in his chair, thinking about how far things had come. Just weeks ago, he had walked into one of his own stores as a nobody, a powerless customer, ignored and mocked. Now, he was standing at the forefront of something bigger than just furniture sales. He was leading a movement of real change. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the store before opening hours. He stood outside for a moment, staring up at the familiar sign with his name on it. For the first time in years, it felt like it meant something again. Stepping inside, he found Mia already at her desk flipping through paperwork. She looked up, surprised. "Didn't take you for a morning person." Ethan smirked. "Didn't take you for one either." She shrugged. "Figured if we're going to do things differently, I should get a head start." Ethan nodded, his respect for her growing even more. As the store filled with employees, Ethan gathered them together once more. "We're not done yet," he told them. "Every customer who walks through these doors deserves the best we can offer. No tricks, no pressure, just real, honest service." There were no skeptical glances this time, no doubt lingering in the air. His employees believed in this change now. Ethan took a slow breath, looking around at the company he had rebuilt, not just in business, but in principle. This wasn't about sales anymore. This was his legacy. And for the first time in a long time, he was proud of it. The story of Ethan Carter's undercover mission teaches a powerful lesson about integrity and leadership and business ethics. It reveals that a company's success should not come at the expense of its customers' trust. Ethan built his business with honesty, but over time, greed and deception seeped into the culture, leading to unethical sales practices that harmed customers. Instead of ignoring the warning signs or relying on filtered reports from his executives, he took direct action, stepping into the customer's shoes to uncover the truth himself. One of the key takeaways is that leaders must be proactive in ensuring their company's values are upheld. Employees will follow the culture set from the top. If deception is rewarded, it will thrive. If honesty is encouraged, it will shape the company's reputation. The story also highlights the importance of treating people with respect, regardless of their financial situation. Customers are not just numbers or profit margins. They are individuals who deserve fairness and transparency. In the end, Ethan's willingness to make bold changes not only saved his business but restored trust with both customers and employees. It proves that long-term success comes from doing what is right, not just what is profitable.